Creepy creatures and critters aren't the only things spooking people in the woods. There are also spirits and other ethereal entities that aren't part of our world, yet can often reach out and touch you whenever they please. These beings come in all shapes and sizes and inclinations. Sometimes they won't even look in your direction. On the other hand, some unlucky folks claim to have been attacked. So enjoy these 5 terrifying encounters that took place in haunted forests. If you want your story narrated, share it with us at darkstories.org. My middle school field trip horror story from Anonymous. I live in Canada, Ontario. I was 12 years old. I was going on a field trip to this place called Taquania, and as soon as we arrived there in the school bus, I had this terrible vibe about the place. When you drive in, to your right is a small wooded area, taking at least 5 minutes to run to the end of. To your left, though, is a building the size of a small school. It sounds big, but it really isn't. Beside that is a field, and past that is an even bigger forest. The first thing that happened was when me and my best friend, O, were playing a game. Our whole class was joining in. The game was called Predator and Prey. The prey wore green pins and the predators wore blue. The prey is supposed to hide from anything that's not wearing the same color as you. Now, me and O were taking selfies on my phone. We were prey at the time, so we were hiding behind a tree. Another one of our friends, named H, found us and took us to this hiding spot at the far back of the small forest. This spot was really hard to find if you don't know where you're heading. When we got there, it was a nice little spot to hide in, a perfect little hideout. It was surrounded by tall grass and wheat, and there was a huge pile of hay that looked like a huge nest. A couple of minutes passed since we made it to the spot. We were beginning to get bored just sitting there, and decided to head back. We weren't even sure if the game was still going. The way we came, we see someone in the distance. Now still wanting to play the game, we figured they were coming to find us, and we didn't want to lose. So me, H, and O turned the other way to run. But 2 other friends who had found us, N and E, caught us and told us the game was over. When I asked them who was the person we saw in the distance, N answered, confused, "I don't know what you mean. We're the last predators. Everyone else went back." That was definitely odd, especially when I looked back a second later and the figure was gone. It shouldn't have been able to disappear that fast, whoever it was. After this, we were all having our free time outside, exploring, talking, or playing other games. Well, we ended up playing a similar game called Manhunt. I'm hiding in the small forest. I'm in a little row of trees to the left of the forest, just walking and trying to stay covered, until I suddenly hear leaves crunching behind me. I jump because it was so sudden it startled me, and I thought that I was caught. But when I turned and looked behind me, I was alone. I turn around and start speed walking to get out of there, but the moment I turned away, the leaves began crunching again. Every time I look, there's no one there. After this happening a few times, I'm terrified. I start running, and that's when the crunching sounds speed up, as if whoever or whatever it is following me has started running too. I'm being chased by something that I can't even see. I run until I'm out of the forest. The moment I break the tree line, the crunching footsteps go silent. It was so strange and creepy. A little bit after this, I decided to rejoin the game as it was still going, and I'm beginning to feel better after that event. I begin walking back to the forest when I see someone up ahead of me. Someone still wearing a blue pin, even though we weren't playing that game anymore. I suddenly stop, and so does the figure. I remember cocking my head to the side in confusion, and the figure did the same thing. After a few more movements that it shared with me, I realized that this person or figure was just mocking what I did, mirroring my movements perfectly. I turned my head for a moment to see if anyone was around me that I could show this bizarre thing to. Then I turned back, and the figure was gone. Suddenly, W, a friend of mine, comes walking out of the bushes, and I ask him if that was him. He looks at me funny, saying that he had just been found in the woods, so he was coming back since he was out now. To make things even better, we began to hear what sounded like an old man screaming for his life. It erupted from the middle of the woods. Both W and I got chills, then began to make our way back to the main building. Strange things continued to happen on that field trip the entire time we were there. More noises, black figures at the edge of the woods, more people being in our group when we played than were actually there. Something was hanging out with us when we were out there. Something was toying with us, or maybe it wanted to play too. It was absolutely eerie. I was happy when we were able to finally go home. Denmark Ghost Story from Anonymous. I was raised in a house in a small town in Denmark, located in a big forest. I really enjoyed playing in the woods as a kid. We had no neighbors living close to us, so I had to entertain myself growing up. One day while playing in the woods, I was climbing a tree when the branch I was leaning on snapped, and I fell to the ground head first. I was out cold for a long time. I'm not sure exactly how long though. When I woke up, the sun was down and everything was dark. I was scared, and I immediately knew my parents would be worried. I usually came home long before dark, so I began to head back to my house with a headache. As I stated before, I often played in these woods, so I became quite uncomfortable when I realized that I didn't recognize my surroundings. I was lost. The forest seemed different, and even though I wasn't used to being in the woods after dark, I didn't think I recognized this place at all. It was like I woke up somewhere else entirely. I began to realize that the forest was unusually quiet then. At night here, you'd expect to hear birds or bugs or both, and usually quite a bit of wind. But I heard nothing, not even the sound of leaves or branches crumbling under my feet. I couldn't smell anything either. I enjoyed the scent of the forest immensely, but I couldn't smell a thing. I attributed this to my head injury, making me worry even more about my own health. However, I could feel a constant cold breeze, even though the breeze made no sound of movement through the forest. As the breeze blew over me, I felt a desire to go back to the tree that I had fallen from, but I had no idea why. I kept walking and soon saw a light in the distance. At first it was dim, but as I drew closer, I saw that it was the light from our house. I was overjoyed. I would have run to the house then if it weren't for my aching head, making me feel dizzy. I made it past the tree line and immediately felt another eerie cold sensation rush over my body. I panicked then, ready to just get home. I stumbled as fast as I could to my front door, and when I was just outside it, I heard a noise behind me. The first sound I'd heard the entire time after I woke up. It was coming from the woods that I had just left. I turned, and what I saw horrified me. I saw myself standing at the edge of the woods, just 300 feet away from where I was now in front of my door. But that didn't make sense. It couldn't be me. So who or what was it? I felt so disoriented. I was unable to move. I wanted more than anything to turn and run into the house, but I was paralyzed. The other me was staring right at me, and every fiber I had told me to go inside now. I mustered all my strength, but all I could do was lift my left hand slightly. I could not stop gazing towards the other me. It was like I was drawn towards it. I saw that it mirrored what I did, lifting its left hand slightly as well. I felt sick and terrified then, and then it happened. The other me began to walk towards me. It began sprinting right at me even though I still could not move. I could only stand there and watch it get closer to me. It stopped the moment it was about 6 feet away. It looked exactly like me. It even had a red spot on its forehead, exactly where I'd hit the ground. But there was one major difference. Our eyes. His were black, empty, like it was soulless. Like it was just my body, without anything meaningful inside. It stared at me for a while with its totally empty eyes. I began to tremble then, tears running down my face, but no matter how much I wanted to scream or move, I was unable to do so. Then it sprinted towards me, jamming right into me, and everything turned completely dark. When I came to, I was below the tree that I'd fallen from earlier. There were no sounds and scents just as before, and it was still dark. Luckily, the thing that attacked me was nowhere to be seen, and I could right away see the dim light of my house far away. Flooding with fear, I picked myself up and began running towards the light. When I crossed the tree line, I could see my house in full detail, and when I made it to the door, I reached for the doorknob, but I could not open it. The knob just kept spinning around. Then I heard the sound again. Footsteps. The doorknob turned and the front door opened. I saw my mother, and I was so relieved. I tried walking towards her and in through the threshold, but my body could no longer move. I tried to talk to my mom, but no sound was escaping my mouth. I looked at her, but she did not seem to recognize me. Actually, she didn't seem to notice me at all. Instead, her eyes were scanning the perimeter behind me, beyond me, before she closed the door in my face. I tried opening the door again, but the doorknob kept spinning just as before. I heard my father yell angrily from inside. I couldn't make out the words, but he sounded upset. I felt so confused, so afraid. What was happening to me? My house, my parents, and everything I knew seemed to be in another world, yet so close. I walked over to the window of my own room, hoping that I could climb in through it. When I reached the window and I looked inside, I saw my empty bed with a lot of pictures of me lying in it, and then I saw a candlelight in my room. I'm from Denmark, and you only put those kinds of candles in a room if the person who had resided in it was deceased. I felt nauseous. I wanted to throw up. What was happening? Why couldn't I get into my own house? Why did they think I was dead? Why didn't they come looking for me? All of a sudden, I noticed that I couldn't see my own reflection in the glass of the window. I looked tensely into it, desperately looking for my own reflection, when I saw a figure instead. The figure was standing further away than I was, so this wasn't my reflection. Chills running down my back, I turned around to face it. Standing in the tree line was a tall, human-shaped figure with a cloth covering its entire face. The only thing visible were 2 glowing red eyes. The thing must have been 7 feet tall, and it began walking towards me. No, it didn't walk though, it floated. I ran from it, knowing that whatever that thing was, it wasn't right. I ran for what felt like years, and then I woke up. I was on the ground in the woods again. I turned over, vomiting my guts out on the ground. I picked myself up and began to stumble again, walking towards my house, towards that dim light in the distance. I knew deep down that when I would turn that doorknob, it wouldn't move. But when it did, and the door opened, and my mother hugged me, I wanted to faint then and there, overcome with joy. I don't know what happened to me that day. I want to assume it was just an odd head injury, some hallucinations, maybe a dream, but it was so real. Another part of me thinks that perhaps I died in those woods that day, and my soul or spirit found a timeline where I survived. But what was that tall thing in the woods? It's all so confusing. I'd rather not think about it. A terrifying encounter from Anonymous. Sometime in the beginning of 2018, I considered myself a skeptic at best of anything paranormal. That all changed quickly after my friends and I had an idea of some fun. Now, despite my skepticism, I've still always been interested in the paranormal and occult. So one thing I took interest in was witchcraft, especially pendulums. A pendulum is a stalagmite-like stone that hangs from a metal chain and is supposedly a way of communicating with your spirit guide. You're supposed to have them cleansed though, so you don't end up speaking to something sinister, something that you'd rather not have in your life. Interest in such items had made me a new friend named G. G had been studying the paranormal and witchcraft long before me. G lived in a gated community a few miles south of myself, and this community had a forest within it. It was considered a genuine Native American burial ground. G introduced me to this place as part of an attempt to change my opinion on the paranormal, which gave me an idea. Now, also at this time, I met a girl on Tinder. She was also very interested in witchcraft. Her name was B. So B, G, and I all decided to meet up around 10 p.m. one night with all the witchcraft and paranormal related equipment we had, ready to speak to spirits in G's little haunted forest. G and I had another lovely friend named T, who we brought along as well. The lot of us met at the local train station, did some introductions, and took a little walk. After that, we split up, taking B's car and my van to G's house. We arrived there around midnight, and after prepping our equipment, we set off for the short walk to the burial ground. Before entering, B lit up a palm-sized bundle of sage and told us that if the flames enlarge at any time, it means a spirit or entity is within a certain proximity of us, and we may need to leave it alone. I raised an eyebrow at this, but I was all the more curious. Not even 10 minutes into the walk, the little bundle of sage practically torched itself within seconds. We all stopped right there when B told us frantically, That's a demon." Now G was a little bit of the cowardly type, so he grabbed T out of instinctive fear, while B and I glanced at each other and slowly backtracked toward the forest exit, G and T behind us. We didn't want to cut our journey short though, so we went the other way in hopes of something less intimidating occurring. B proposed that we approach this in a more cautious manner, placing her at the front of the group and myself in the back, as I was considered the more capable one at the moment, being lightly armed, and could keep a lookout for us. Another few minutes into this journey, G proposed we stop and talk so he could try to ease himself of the anxiousness he claimed to be feeling. As he was ranting about whatever it was he felt was wrong, I glanced back where we came from and noticed a short, child-sized figure that was darker than the shadows cast by the trees, standing not 10 feet from me. My immediate reaction was to blink rapidly and squint, thinking that the shadows were being altered by the wind. This wasn't the case, as I continued to stare at it while it stared back at me. I'm not much of one for spastic reactions, so I calmly turned around, abruptly interrupting the group's conversation and informing them of what I just saw. B told me to take out my pendulum immediately and speak to it. Reluctantly, I did so, As the pendulum does not utter words, only yes and no based on a certain motion attuned to the user, I asked this entity if it was displeased with us for being here. It seemed to say yes. B told me to ask it if it would like us to leave, and despite me being the user and B simply relaying the question, it spun in a rapid circle, signaling another and more aggressive yes. We all simultaneously began rapidly walking back to the exit, not wanting to be harmed by whatever this thing was. Unsatisfied with the events, we discussed what we might do next in order to satiate our curiosity. I remained in the back of the group, feeling that something wasn't right, occasionally glancing back at the forest as if it were a necessity. When we were roughly 200 yards away, I took another look behind us and froze. I noticed a bright orange light that was similar to the light of the sun rising over trees in the earliest of the morning. Considering it was just past 1 a.m., that would be impossible. I strained my eyes in an attempt to make sense of what I was looking at, while informing the group about it. They stopped as well and looked with me. Puzzled sounds came from their mouths. By the time I realized what it was nearly too late. It was the same entity I alone spotted before, running full sprint at us at an impossible speed, except it was increasing in size as it got closer, reaching around 8 or 9 feet by the time it was 15 yards from us. My immediate reaction was to scream "run" and bolt past everyone else, not wanting to be grabbed by this phantom monstrosity. G began crying, while him, T, and B quickly attempted to sprint away from what would most likely be our end. We did not stop running until we got to G's house and decided we had enough for the night. This encounter definitely changed my feelings and opinion on the paranormal, and I've got a newfound respect for the entities that inhabit it. The Unknown Intruder, from Anonymous. I was home alone at my dad's house. I hated staying there on my own. My dad had gone to the train station to pick someone up, and so I had to stay on my own for the next 2 hours. Considering the time was around 10 p.m. and halfway through November, it was already well into the night and very cold. As staying alone in this house out in the woods always creeped me out, I turned on a movie to take my mind off of things. Now, we had these 2 sheds in the garden, both of which were ancient, but I would always hear noises at night. Loud bangs, scraping sounds, and other mysterious noises, always coming from those sheds or the garden, but I tried not to dwell on it. Everything was fine that night until I heard a loud bang come from outside. It sounded like it was coming from one of the sheds. I slowly and quietly crawled from the living room to a window, viewing the back garden, and my stomach dropped. I could see a tall, dark shadow standing in front of the forest, looking around and slowly walking towards our house. I hid for a minute, but every second that passed felt more like an hour, my heart racing. Eventually, I peeked out at one of the windows down the hallway and saw the all-too-tall figure peering inside. It saw me looking at it, then darted away off the property. I stayed hidden for a bit longer, but I heard nothing else. I never saw the figure again, and I'm glad, but I'm even more terrified of staying home alone anymore. Ghostly Warning, from Chain Gang 357. When I was a child at about 7 years old, I was living in a small town called Wilkeson in Washington State. We lived on the outskirts in a decent-sized neighborhood surrounded by woods. Being close to Mount Rainier, it was quite rural. I lived in a 2-story house with my window facing the driveway and front yard. In my room, I just got a bunk bed and thought it was the coolest thing because I could see out my window while I was in bed. About a week after I got the bunk bed, I woke up in the middle of the night having to use the bathroom. As I made my way to the ladder, I looked out my window and saw 2 people outside on the lawn. I climbed down and I jumped on the cabinet that was in front of the window for a better look at the people. As I looked out, I saw 2 women standing at the edge of my driveway, staring at my lawn and talking to each other. The weird thing was, where they were pointing was where my black lab liked to lay down. I knocked on my window trying to get their attention and find out what they wanted. In unison, they slowly turned their heads and looked at me. Their faces were gray-white and blank of any expression. I realized then that their clothes were weird, like something people would wear a long time ago, and they didn't have any color on them either. I jumped down from the cabinet and I saw them turn their heads back and stare at the same spot. I woke up my mother and told her about the people in our driveway. We were outside in a couple of minutes, and by then the ladies were gone with no trace of them at all. Fast forward 3 weeks, I woke up again in the middle of the night. Now, since that first night I saw those women, I had dreaded getting up to go to the bathroom, but every time I was relieved when I didn't see them. One night, however, I got up and I saw them again. I climbed up on the cabinet, and this time they were already looking right at me. Both of their faces were different this time. Their eyes were solid black and they were both frowning. In unison, they lifted up their arms and pointed at my lawn. There in the lawn was my lab. He was sleeping. My dad had let him out when he left for work. I ran and got my mom and told her about the ladies and my dog. We went downstairs and opened the front door. My dog had just started barking when we walked out on the front porch. The ladies were already gone again, but this time a guy was running at my lab with a stick trying to hit him. When he saw us, he turned away and ran. After that day, we made sure my dad didn't let my dog out, and I never saw the ladies again. It may have been scary to see those ladies, but maybe, just maybe, they were actually looking out for my dog. So you like that cheap big house out in the woods that somehow has all the internet hookups you need? Well, don't bother. By now you should know that moving into a house in the middle of the woods, you're gonna get haunted. Then again, if you want to be terrorized by ghosts every day, then be my guests. Just remember, all these woods are haunted. Good night. If you enjoyed this episode of Darkness Prevails, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. If you want your story narrated, share it with us at darkstories.org. And if you want to support the show, check the links below. There's a link to my Patreon if you'd like to donate. And there's a link to get some of my creepy merchandise. Now, as usual, here are my 5 favorite early comments from the previous video about 10 mysterious creatures seen in Europe. Kautuku Bakidoro says, "Oh yes, the Brits are very weird. Hey, be nice, or you won't be getting any tea and biscuits. And I love biscuits." Thomas Darrowing says, "I once saw a creature in Europe. His name is Michael." Thomas, I'm gonna pray for you. And I guess I should pray for Michael too if you think he's a creature. This comment, Lord oh Lord. Goff Daily says, "Stories like these are hit or myth." Well, I hope you're proud, Goff, because you just guaranteed the apocalypse. It's coming, friends. It's coming, and you can thank Goff. Delirious Pug says, "Pugs are gods." Yeah, I love pugs, but I don't know what that has to do with the Monsters in Europe video. But yeah, pugs are pretty great. And Alex Ortiz says, "Thanks for your hard work. Keep it up. You got me coming back every time because I like it while I do deliveries for Domino's." Thanks, Alex. I really just think Domino's is okay. That's some really regular pizza right there. For real though, I'd really like to do some more delivery stories, because pizza delivery can be daunting and scary. Well, that brings us to the end of this Darkness Prevails episode. But don't you worry, because more scary stories are coming soon, so stay tuned. Until next time, here are the credits to my amazing patrons who continue to donate. they're sexy people. Remember, stay safe out there and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one.